This is Lakey. We've had some interactions. He usually will not. I mean, I've never had him think about something that I've said that's constructive, something he could do something with, something that does reflect reality and flies in the face of what he shops around. In this case, initially speaking, mind you, I like what he did. This is very kind. As it reads, 364, and he says houseless, maybe homeless is being censored. Either way, I fucking hate catering to shit like that. But you never know, maybe he's being creative. 364 houseless died in San Antonio last year. It doesn't have the same ring as homeless, but maybe that's because I've been conditioned to think in terms of that. And maybe you should think in terms of what I just said. Words have power, and we are manipulated by, language. It's by design, not coincidence. I do like that he knocked this out. He knocked it out in terms of a spectrum, having to do with the 7 rays. That's kind of neat. You can always watch this on mute in case you just want to soak this up and not have to listen to this bastard. I'm going to show you something in a second, though. So, yeah. You might know why. So I contacted him 19 hours ago. He hasn't said a damn thing. I left him that on there. No one has said a damn thing, mind you. Said, kind of you to take the time to knock this out. It needs to be mentioned at the end of the video you flashed a hand gesture. It doesn't represent peace, even though that's what people were, it should say trained to repeat. Pardon me for talking at Google. It's intuitive if you think about it. What you left on the internet looks like the letter V because it relates to victory. It's also known as the cross of Nero, otherwise known as the end of man. And you should look these things up. If you look these things up and you start tracking this shit, it leads somewhere. It means something. There are people out there that will argue otherwise based on superficial fluff. Now, keep in mind, this fluff, there's another narrative that people used to just squeal at me, having to do with Woodstock and olive oil, of all things. And that's where allegedly, the peace sigil came from. And most likely, if I'm not mistaken, and if I recall correctly, parts of that olive oil story do have to do with what I tell you next and what people have since possibly dug deeper, maybe. Either way, the other aspect of this has to do with, nuclear stuff, which people don't understand, mind you. Some people will tell you it doesn't exist, but that's just as good as saying that the ether doesn't exist. In other words, they don't understand how our masters are doing things and what's what. But that's a story for another day. Back to point. I said superficial fluff from 1958, which is a nuclear narrative which allegedly is where the sigil or symbol of peace originated. And it's garbage. I said, however, what I'm referring you to, which is a bad way to put it, predates that garbage. There are numerous fucking angles involved in this, and you can look them up. And all of them predate 1958. But if you engage in a conversation with a pseudo-intellectual, they're going to fucking rattle off 1958, because that's what Google will tell people now. And that's probably why people are squealing 1958. They probably didn't research. They probably just asked Google, and that was the top result. And that's probably why they're not telling me about the olive oil story anymore, because it was a deeper thread, so to speak. And it's not something Google's just shopping around. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm fucking right. If you look at the old esoterica, age-old depictions of saints and godly figures, note that they bring their pointer finger side by side with their middle finger. In other words, if you collapse that V, you use, how you can do, you can make scissors with your hand, so to speak. Close the scissors is what I'm talking about. Just in case, because people are very, very dumb these days. If you look at it should say age old, I think. Wait, if you look at no, it does say it right. All right. If you look at the old esoterica, age old depictions of saints, there we go, and godly figures. Let's see. Wait, where did it go? Note that they bring their pointer finger side by side with their middle finger, because this creates a union and denotes peace. It makes sense if you think about it as well, which is how reality works, which is how all things should work, and technically how things do work, but most people aren't thinking, let alone in terms of how we're being manipulated. An example in popular programming. Truthfully, it's lesser magic. And I've rattled this off before, and it's superficial shit, but it is in the programming because our masters understand what I'm talking about and how they're manipulating people. But people who've been manipulated don't have a fucking clue, and they don't have eyes to see. So back to point. Truthfully, it's lesser magic. It's when that pedophile Tom Hanks says goodbye to Jenny in Forrest Gump. I believe she's leaving in a bus. I keep saying this because I haven't seen that horrible film in many years. If you look closely, Tom Hanks, Forrest Gump, raises one hand and lowers the other because Jenny's flashing peace, if I'm correct. But when I say peace, she's flashing the cross of Nero. She's flashing, and I haven't said this in a video, I don't think, the end of man, if I recall correctly. In other words, the feminine she's shopping around something disharmonious, so to speak. Granted, she represents magnetism and darkness and all those things. It's part of our system. It's crucial. Each of us have an aspect of that in case you're getting off on the wrong foot. But Tom Hanks being the dude, the vaginas, throwing up, conquer and divide, essentially. Hegelian dialectic, blue versus red. And the dude, who has, I think Tom Hanks has a cock because he's a pedophile and a pervert, but you never know. Either way, what he does is he throws up the genuine symbol of peace. The right hand goes up and the left hand goes down, and both those fingers, you close the scissors, and it's peace above and peace below. And it is lesser magic in an entirely different way in terms of symbolism. In a Hollywood movie, in a big budget Hollywood movie, and it's a blink and you'll miss it moment. And if you're not looking close at his left hand, you won't realize that both hands are doing something. And collectively they mean something. And then when you throw in Jenny doing what she's doing, it means even more. And that's, if I recall this correctly, I'm pretty fucking sure she does that. She's saying bye and she flashes the bullshit peace. And Tom Hanks says peace above, peace below. That's the point. But you don't hear anybody explain this to you. And Forrest Gump is how old? I remember I watched it in a drive-in back in Santa Fe, New Mexico, before they bulldozed the fucking drive-in. That's what it makes me think of when I think of fucking Forrest Gump. I watched the movie because I was hanging out with a girl really close to the fucking screen on some playground equipment. And neither of us had any sound because we weren't sitting in a car, but we were hanging out because I was wanting to hang out with a girl. So that's how I first watched fucking Forrest Gump. And it's still a shitty film, with sound or otherwise. But back to point. I said, if you cross-reference what I said and apply it to what most people flash and assume represents peace, it's a disharmonious act of magic at its fucking finest. And what I said in here is pretty neat, if you think about it. Nobody in here is going to challenge, Lakey. I know that's not his name, and I forgot his actual name, but his, cyber handle. I just taught people something. In other words, people who have never fucking run through anything I've ever left on the internet, I just taught you guys something. But most people aren't going to look up the other accounts that I moderate. If I tell people in here, I leave videos online, and I have been for over a decade. Most, and I don't want you guys to, but most don't friend this account. But what I want you guys to do is look up the other accounts that I moderate on the fucking DARPA internet that are public, and you can watch the fucking videos. But people don't do that. Most of the time. They don't. They don't. But what the fuck do I know?